have the airplane, the story has the Flight 77 was going 530 miles an hour, 460 knots, and it can't go that fast on level flight down that low. If you're up high, the true airspeed can go up, and it can go that fast, but not down low. The air is too dense.
I challenge any pilot anywhere. Give him a Boeing 757, tell him to do 400 knots 20 feet above the ground for half a mile. Can't do. It's aerodynamically impossible.
So the story of how the airplane hit the Pentagon just doesn't make any sense at all.
After Hani Hanjour, the plane's pilot, had been identified, his flight instructor declared that his student was not even able to fly a small single-engine aeroplane.
These guys didn't have the experience to make that kind of maneuver, even if the airplane could fly that.
The man could not fly at all.
There's no way you could possibly come out of a 172 and fly a jet that you've never flown before. That's like showing me how to carve up a Christmas turkey and then say, go make a heart transplant.
Even if we suppose that such an incompetent pilot had the opportunity to fly a Boeing 757, we still have to ask ourselves how he managed to violate the most heavily protected airspace in the world.
Lo spazio aereo più protetto del mondo.
No untracked aircraft get near the Pentagon and near the White House. It just doesn't happen.
In Washington, D.C., we have one of the most restricted airspaces in the world. It's called P-56. It has a separate radar tracking system and a separate military response system.
P-56 is that restricted airspace that is around the Pentagon and the White House, and it is a highly, highly, highly sensitive area. There are supposed to be no unknown aircraft that can go through there.
That has an air defense identification zone in a 50-mile radius around D.C., and then it has a protected zone 17 miles around the Washington Monument and an inner protected zone 3 miles around the Capitol. That space is essentially unbreachable. It has to be because of the importance of the buildings there.
It's like an aviation no man's land. Nobody goes in there. Nobody.
They have F-16 and F-18 jets at Andrews Air Force Base, about 10 miles south of D.C. They also have the 113th National Guard Air Wing at Anacostia Naval Air Station that can send scrambler jets up in a very short period of time. Both are in place that day. Neither one responds at all until after the Pentagon is hit. In addition to that, the Pentagon has its own defenses.
If a plane, any kind of a plane, was coming in towards the Pentagon, why didn't the anti-aircraft missiles batteries that are there, why didn't they fire to protect the building? This is, after all, the most heavily protected building on the planet. That craft had to have been a military craft, because only the military craft put out a signal. It's called an Identify Friend or Foe IFF device. And only the military craft would be allowed to approach the building.
The two radar systems that the military radars, defensive radar systems, read are a civilian transponder and a military transponder. Military transponder is called IFF. Civilian aircraft do not have an IFF transponder. They are not given that capability. Okay? So if there was a 757, American 757, that went into the Pentagon, for example, and it shut off its transponder, it didn't have a military IFF transponder on it. So it was a primary target. It's a primary target going into that airspace. Should have been shot down.
What I'm describing to you is a breakdown in standard operating procedure by FAA, NORAD, P-56, and the Pentagon, all on the same day, in the middle of, after 9/05, what was known nationally to be a terrorist attack. And it makes no sense.
Nobody goes in there.
This is, after all, the most heavily protected building on the planet.
It just doesn't make any sense at all.
The
Pentagon symbolizes our military power in the world. And they had hit it. And to this day, nobody knows what they hit it with, whether it was an airplane or whether it was a missile. And our government will never tell us. So we just wait for the French to explain it.
What hit it? What's going on?
There is nobody anywhere at any point in this entire investigation that has said that is positively American 77. They suppose it, they presume it, they assume it, they say this is what we think it is.
The controller, Daniel O'Brien, who saw the unidentified blip coming in from the west at a high rate of speed, had no way of knowing what it was, because the primary was a primary return only. The secondary radar, the transponder, was turned off.
In order to identify a primary radar target, you have to have two-way communications between the pilot and the air traffic controller, and the pilot has to report over a certain geographical location, or you have to be able to tell the pilot in the airplane to make a series of turns, and then the radar controller can look at all of the primary targets on his or her radar scope and say, there's an aircraft, there's a target that just executed the turns I told. Now I can positively identify the aircraft. That never occurred. It's huge.
Now, if Flight 77 really did go off of the radar screen for 36 minutes, according to her testimony, then the airplane was no longer flying, or it was low enough it was out of radar coverage. One of the two. So, was the airplane landed at some place, some remote field? Then it does make sense that they lost the airplane for 36 minutes. But other than that, there's very little explanation for that.
In the light of what we've seen and heard, it seems that the official version of 9/11 is not sufficient. We want the facts to be explained to us, and above all, we want them to be properly investigated. Basically, we want someone to finally tell us the truth.
The United States government spends $892 billion per year to defend its citizens and its territory. It is the best protected country in the world, as President Bush has said. Nevertheless, on the 11th of September, the heart of America was attacked from the sky, and 3,000 helpless American citizens were killed in their own cities.
If I had been sitting on that committee, the congressional committee examining 9/11, the one question that they could not get the Air Force to answer correctly in NORAD was why the fighter planes did not go up automatically when the first planes were found to be hijacked.
Anytime an airliner goes off course or loses radio communication or loses its transponder signal, anytime any one of those three things happen, the aircraft is supposed to be intercepted. On 9/11, all three of those things happened, and still there was no intercept. Those planes flew around for from 20 minutes to an hour and a half without ever being intercepted.
We have direct contacts with our air defense colleagues by means of direct connections that are controlled by this touchscreen apparatus. By pressing just one key here, the call is sent, to which the operator of the defense, in this case, answers directly. In the time it takes to answer the telephone call, around 2 to 3 seconds, the information can be already exchanged. So why weren't the 4 hijacked planes intercepted and shot down? Military jets travel much faster than passenger aircraft. It would have been easy for them to catch up the jet planes before they crashed. This airplane can reach a maximum speed of Mach 2.05. This means it exceeds twice the sound barrier. This is approximately 2,400 kilometers per hour. In the northeast of the United States, there are as many as 16 Air Force bases. Why weren't the Boeing jets intercepted? The official story argues that Air Defense was informed too late.
One of the biggest lies is that the FAA guys were incompetent.